As you guys know, we love Atari around here. So we thought it was about time we did an Atari list. And what better place to start than the top five Atari 2600 games? Now, again, this is a top five. It's just our opinion. So that means it's fact. And the fact is that I don't think Kelly and I are going to have too much crossover on our list. So it might be more like a top 10, in which case, again, this is factual. You need to go buy all 10 of these cartridges, or your
I'm gonna
collection's not really complete.
I'm gonna make an early prediction that there might be two out of the
Okay.
five that are shared. We'll see. I'm highly
Kelly has beat him
confident.
and eat him on his list.
I'm highly confident there will be three that I have three on that you're not going to have on. But the other two, I said, I bet you there's a chance. So we'll see.
Nice. Well, before we get started on our list, I did decide to do some research. And of course, I would never, ever try to shamelessly self promote on here. I wouldn't do that. Kelly knows that. The Panda Army knows that. But I happen to be in a band called the Rust Belt. So I reached out to my other two band members and asked them, because they're also 2600 guys, what their all time favorite Atari 2600 game is. So I figured I'd share that first because neither is on my list. So I'm curious to see if they pop up on Kelly's. So our mutual friend Vex said Pitfall for him, followed by multiple exclamation points. So he really means it for Pitfall. Bill went back and forth between Adventure and Berserk, but landed on Berserk. He loves that game. So that edged out for him. I did mention to him that we've reviewed Berserk on here, which of course, as everyone knows, is the definitive review of Atari 2600 Berserk. Now, before we get started, sir, is there any kind of runner-up or caveats or anything to your list you'd like to throw out there?
No, I did. We didn't square this before, but I'm going to make the assumption. And given what Vex's number one was, our favorite game was, he's including the Activision catalog in there versus strictly games produced by Atari. So I assume that was fair game. So so I did that, but that's the only. So any publisher, because that'll allow you to get your beat 'em and eat 'em in as well. So you're all set there. So it's a good deal.
Yeah, I would just add, so yeah, any publisher, this is just Atari 2600 is the way I was approaching it. I did not include things like the movie card or basic programming for Atari because those aren't really games for it. I wanted to stick strictly to games just so I could narrow it down a little bit more. As much as I love Beat 'em and Eat 'em, I did not include that on there. I do still highly recommend everyone go out and play it, as well as its palette gender swapped version, Philly Flasher. Philly Flasher might even actually be a little bit better than Beat 'em and Eat 'em, but Beat 'em and Eat 'em is just fun to say, obviously. I think before we get into the list, the thing that's going to probably surprise people is I opted not to put the 2600 version of Dark Chambers on here. I love Dark Chambers and the whole Gauntlet Dandy universe. Not so much the original Dandy, but all the Gauntlet games, the Dark Chambers versions of them, I love as well. But it really came down to I prefer the 7800 version of it so much over the 2600 version. As great as the 2600 version is, and it does some really cool things that you wouldn't expect the 2600 to be able to do, it does it with helper chips. It still falls way short of the 7800. So if we do eventually review that game or do a 7800 list, I'd rather focus on that version.
Fair enough. Uh, you wanna we'll go up from fifth to first position, exchanging back and forth. I can go
Sounds
and
good. Do you,
I can go ahead and start us off. And what's interesting on the show is that Mike's bandmates have earned nicknames in the process of setting the show up. So we'll start with Bill the Caboose. Caboose predicted or brought out Berserk. That is my number five. We have reviewed it. You can hear what we had to say on that, but it's fun gameplay. It's pretty accurate to the arcade game. As for 2600, it's very accurate to the arcade for what you can do in 2600. Uh, Always liked the game in the arcade. Liked it on the 2600. Berserk is my number five.
for my number five, I decided to go with a movie tie-in, which people might not expect. Movie tie-in from a beloved science fiction classic about a certain extraterrestrial. Obviously, I'm talking about Alien from Fox for the 2600. As we mentioned when we did our Pac-Man 2600 review, it's essentially a Pac-Man clone, but with way better graphics, great controls, and guns, like Pac-Man always should have had. So, if you like that Pac-Man maze style gameplay, it's super easy to pick up. You could let a kid play it, but there is plenty of difficulty, especially as you get further into the game. It's everything Pac-Man 2600 should have been, but with Alien brand new on it.
Good choice. Really good choice. Number four for me, it's an Activision title, is boxing. I was interested in putting this together because there were, as I was starting to come up with this list, I was finding out more and more that there were several sports games, and well, not even necessarily sports games, because like Tank Combat. Um, the we talk a lot on our reviews around the Nintendo 64 being the multiplayer platform and really great for that. There are a number of Atari 2600 titles, Warlords amongst them, that really increase your enjoyment as a multiplayer game. Boxing, boxing is one of those. It You can play against the computer, but you can also play against a friend or someone who's not a friend when you crush them in 3 rounds. So, boxing, very austere graphics, not much. It's a not Mike Tyson punch out kind of thing, but it's a fun game, and that's my number four.
Nice. Now, is that the real sports boxing or just boxing?
Boxing from Activision.
Okay. All right. In my number four spot, I'm going to go with a game that I'm going to say is probably visually the most impressive on 2600. In that, especially back in the original run, this is not a later homebrew game or something that's using a movie card or anything that advanced in there. It has graphics that could trick you into thinking that this was an early NES game, which was obviously a system that not only was more powerful, but had a lot more RAM to work with and much larger cartridge sizes. It is impressive that they got this to run. That's Solaris, which has been brought up before when we've looked at Atari lists of good looking games. It's also a great game. There's a lot more depth to it than you'd expect. There's great use of color. And again, the scrolling scenes of you flying into the screen with the scrolling backgrounds and everything are really impressive for the 2600. This really looks like an early NES game or maybe like a Sega card game. It definitely looks far beyond what the 2600 could do. And it's fun to play. And it's a game that I came to a lot later. I didn't play Solaris until I played it on the Atari Fight Stick. It was included in there, and I thought they put it under the wrong category. So under 2600, I was like, this has to be at least a 7800, maybe even an early arcade game. But no, it's a 2600 game.
That's a good choice. Really good. Um, Now here's one I think we're going to match on. I think this is going to be on your list, so we'll see. Haunted House is my number three. Uh, so we've talked about Haunted House. We've not done a formal Panda review yet, but we have talked about Haunted House uh, a number of times, actually, I think. But fun gameplay, pretty entertaining. The enhanced version that's on the much beloved Atari 50th anniversary is a very cool upgrade to the game too. So not counting that in there, although it is outstanding. So one, we've told you multiple times, buy that Atari 50th anniversary collection, but play the upgraded Haunted House. It's really fun, but in its original glory, pretty cool too. So Haunted House, my number three.
And my number three, you may have heard of this, Kelly. It's Haunted House. So you're definitely right at the crossover and in the same spot. And this was a tough one. I kept kind of bouncing these top three around. Haunted House is an important game because it was one of the first games to have player forced scrolling. So even though the graphics are very simple, what I like, Atari's at its best. The Atari 2600 games are at their best when they're using the limitations of the system to work within the confines of the game. And few games do it as well as this, in my opinion, because the graphics are so simplistic that they were able to do things like player force scrolling that people really hadn't seen before at that time. It's also a lot of people credit it as the first survival horror game. I don't know that I would go quite that far, but it's definitely you could draw a straight line from it to the first survival horror games. So like the example I would use is like look at slasher movies, which really kicked off with Halloween and to slightly lesser extent shortly before that with Black Christmas. You wouldn't say that movies like Psycho and Peeping Tom are slasher movies, but you can see the huge influence they had on those early slasher movies. That's the way that I look at Haunted House. Is are you going to play Haunted House and then play Resident Evil and think these are the same thing? No. But you can see the influence and some of the early breadcrumbs leading the trail to things like Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil years later.
Well, certainly can't argue about your number three choice at all. Number two for me is Adventure, not Venture. This is very akin to Haunted House in many respects in terms of the gameplay. Um, it really fun. Another one we haven't reviewed. This one I don't think will fare well in repeat play. Maybe a little do okay, but it is one that kind of once you complete it, the incentive to go back and kind of redo the whole thing again is not nearly as high. It doesn't have that same kind of fresh replay stuff. But that gotta tell you that first path through, trying to sort everything out, how to use the bridge, get the keys moved around, and use the sword, and eventually find the little magic Easter egg in the maze, the invisible maze behind the castle, is all pretty cool. And I always enjoyed it. Early Dungeons and Dragons type of thing. Now, yes, the dragons look like ducks. That's a problem, but it is the Atari. So, credit where credit is due on that. Cut them some slack on that. The sword kind of looks like a sword. So that's something. The bat's not bad either, but the dragons are pretty duck-like. But it's still fun. I can remember fondly enjoying that game and working to kind of bring it to conclusion. So Adventure is my number two.
And it's funny you mentioned that too, because again, Atari 50th collection, we can't stress this enough. Many of the games we mentioned are on there. Everything but Alien so far is on there. But another game that's on there is Return to Haunted House, which is different than the reboot that Kelly's talking about. Haunted House did have a bunch of sequels and reboots over the years. There's 6 games total, I believe, at this point for Haunted House. But Return to Haunted House was the first sequel. And what's interesting about it is it started as a homebrew game, which is becoming a common theme now for Atari. But this was before that was a thing. In the early 2000s, Atari officially took over a homebrew game. They reached out to the creators and were like, we want to make this official and started putting it on Atari collections as an official game. So that was the first one that they did that with. And the game was made by taking the adventure engine and reworking it into a haunted house sequel. So it's actually kind of a mashup of adventure and haunted house.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and it's on the Atari 50th collection, so definitely worth checking out. Now, we're at the number 2 position. This was hard because I kept going back and forth on these. And ultimately, I didn't want to make this number 1 just because it's a newer game. It's a Atari age release, but it is probably the best use from what I was saying earlier about using the limitations. It's one of the best uses of the limitations to make something awesome with it. And that's Spies in the Night. It is a simple one screen game. There are multiple screens, but you're working your way as sort of a puzzle game. You're working your way across the screen. Very simplistic graphics and all in black and white, but it uses the black and white to recreate a sort of film noir tone for it, where you're supposed to be a spy who's sneaking up to a lighthouse that's in the distance. You can't be, the lighthouse light is rotating around. If you're caught in the light, you'll be shot by a sniper and have to start over. So there's broken pieces of rock and fence and things like that that you have to run in between the beams of light to hide behind before the sniper gets you. But you're also under a time limit to make it to the lighthouse so that you can blow up the lighthouse where the bad guys are. The graphics are very simple but look fantastic because again they made a game to match simplistic graphics. It's all black and white. It fits the film noir look of it, and the rocks and the different things that you hide behind are randomly generated. So it's different every time. You're not learning a pattern. You're playing through it a different way each time that you play it. It's a great use of the limitations of the hardware. Super fun. I keep coming back to it ever since I got it. I play it as much as any Atari game at this point. So it had to be high on my list just because I love it so much. I just didn't want to make a newer aftermarket game the number one, but it could be tied for it.
Excellent. And so now my number one. So my confidence has greatly diminished that we're going to match two. So I think we're going to match one. That's okay. We began my list with a new nickname for Bill. Mike's band, he's the caboose now. And now we're talking about the engine Vex, the powerful steam engine Vex, and Pitfall with multiple exclamation points. Activision game as well. Could argue Pitfall 2 over Pitfall, but I'm going to go with the original. It was such a fresh difference in gameplay. It was really cool, very enjoyable. Even though it's not entirely different than adventure in that once you've kind of mastered some things, there's not a lot of new stuff going to come your way, but it just feels more repeat playable. It's enjoyable because there's a lot of timing and skill involved in navigating some of the challenges in Pitfall. So really fun. Maybe not the greatest music, but what Atari thing has the greatest music? It's not bad, but the sound for Atari is the sound for Atari. But Pitfall, not a surprising one, usually on the top or towards the top of a lot of people's lists. But I don't believe it's going to be on top of yours. But I will go for Pitfall along with Vex for my number one.
Obviously, then my number one, Pac-Man 2600. No, my number one, if you guys have watched before, you probably figured it out. I'm sure Kelly's figured it out. Yar's Revenge.
Mhm.
Uh, Yar's Revenge was the first game that really got me into 2600. So my dad and my uncles had 2600s. I played a couple of things, but nothing. I mean, I had an NES, so I was like, this is way better. Why would I play 2600? Then I came across Yar's Revenge, and it had a comic book in it that explained the game to you and gave you backstory of everything. Because you have to remember, unlike NES with Atari, you had to use a lot more imagination, especially in the earlier Atari games. So why do work when everything is handed to you with the NES? But now I had a comic book explaining it. And also, the first couple times I had played Yar's Revenge, before I read the comic book and before anybody explained to me how to properly play the game, I didn't get it. And I just got frustrated and quit. But once I did, it's again really good use of a single screen experience. It's also really good use of color and the way that the Atari 2600 can cycle colors to create things like the force field and the explosions and things like that. So it's just an interesting, unique looking game. And for such a simple game, there's a lot more depth to the mechanics of it than you would expect there to be. It's a game that I still play all these years later. I've bought multiple versions of it over the years. Uh, most of the games we mentioned are in the Atari 50th collection, and just like with Haunted House, there is a reboot version from Digital Eclipse of Yours Revenge on there that I really love. I think that one was great. There's also a new Yars game that Atari put out for modern consoles. That's a completely new game though. But the reboot version of it that you can get in the Atari 50th collection also really worth
So those are our top five, top nine collectively.
playing.
So I guess, given Mike's intro at the beginning, I guess any list you provide back to us will have to include haunted house. Clearly, that's a non-negotiable. But we would like to hear from you in the comments if you've got whether it's just your top 2600 game or your top five. Let us know in the comments to do that. And while you're there, hey, throw in a subscribe, hit the bell. It'll be good for you. You'll enjoy it. And you will get with that not only content such as this, but a daily dose of Hard No, the world's shortest podcast. And since we do hope a few retro gamers watch our content, since most of the stuff we talk about is retro gaming, you may want to check Bog Panda Vision out. It's off of our website, which is a link in the description. And we have a lot of ROMs out there, freely distributable ROMs out there. So you can, for the Game Boy, the Slapdash universe continues to grow, extends into an NES game as well. And Doom, there's Doom levels as well for Boom Panda. So you can check those out. 7 levels so far. Probably another one to come sometime. The not too distant future. And also merchandise. So clever t-shirt ideas that we have come up with that are the only way to watch Bog Panda. Anything else you'd like to add about the universe of 2600 in your favorites, sir?
No, I mean, we would love to hear what your guys' picks are. I mean, there's so many great 2600 games. We're obviously big Atari fans. And again, we're not getting anything from Atari for this, though we should. You should go out and pick up the Atari 50th collection for whatever platform. With all the DLC and everything, I believe there's over 100 games now. There's like a couple of hours of interviews and things, scans of all the instruction booklets. It's just such a great collection.
Yeah, and I think we started kind of hitting on the Atari stuff pre-Renaissance before Atari started to kind of hit it. One might say we're responsible for the Atari Renaissance and have been unrewarded for it, Atari, but that's the way it goes, I guess. So, but we appreciate you guys watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. Share, like, all that fun stuff, and we'll catch you again soon. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.